All right, we are at the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to part one of our Elemental Analysis of Food webinar series. I'm Lauren Armstrong, Marketing Director for Quantum Analytics, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. During today's webinar, we are going to be talking about improving food and feed production with XRF. Today, I'm going to be very excited to be joined by Brian Diverse, Spectroscopy Product Manager for Quantum Analytics. Brian is responsible for developing, consulting, and supporting customer activities for spectroscopy and elemental analysis product lines, such as infrared, XRF, XRD, XRM, combustion gas analysis, and more. Before I hand the mic over to Brian, if you have any questions, please enter them at any time into the questions module in the GoToWebinar control panel at the right side of your screen. All right, that is it for me. Brian, take it away.
All right, right on. Well, thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I appreciate you sharing a piece of your day to attend this webinar. So let's get started here. Let's see. All right, so today's topics for this presentation will include details on why monitoring food and feed is important. I'll provide a brief overview of the food and feed market, and then we'll discuss why XRF is the right tool to monitor food quality. I'll show you some food and feed example applications using the Bruker S2 Puma benchtop XRF, and then I'll show you some example of some of these installations, and then we'll conclude with some details about the S2 Puma and which of the features that are useful for food and agriculture applications. But first, I'd like to let you know a little bit more about who we are at Quantum Analytics. If you're new to Quantum, this company, we're a value-added distributor of multi-vendor analytical instruments for the US and Canada. And we specialize in providing solutions for gas phase chromatography, elemental analysis, and molecular spectroscopy. We've been doing business for more than 30 years with a technology center and laboratory located in Houston, Texas, where we have a portfolio of premier manufacturing partners and solutions with companies like Agilent Technologies, Bruker, Elementar, Frontier Lab, Marks International for like thermal absorption technologies, and Zytec for molecular spectroscopy accessories. So let's get started. We're talking about food and agriculture, and why is monitoring food and agriculture important? So there's a lot of good reason for food analysis, but one of the most important ones are the legal regulations and recommendations. Standards of identity specify type and amount of ingredients of certain foods. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this nutritional labeling that you see here, which is required to show the nutritional facts, including elements for nutrients such as calcium and iron, for example. And of course, there are food inspections which ensure that your food is meeting the appropriate laws and regulatory requirements. So reasons for analysis. Food safety is a priority. We want to minimize any toxic contaminant and plastic type particles. This could be high nickel or arsenic concentrations that may be limited in our food and feed, or must be limited in our food and feed. This could be also foreign material such as metals that come from the processing equipment that's used in the manufacturing and production process. Typically, when we're talking about monitoring quality of our food, it's important to characterize your raw materials. This continues into monitoring food processes during production, as well as analyzing food materials as a final product. This is necessary to ensure high quality, safety, and nutritional content, such as label claim and listing out the important nutrient content and their concentrations. Research and development teams are continuously trying to evolve products. Food scientists are trying to keep up with consumer demands for improved quality and taste in food and ingredients, while trying to maintain lower cost as well as optimize their shelf life. To give you some additional background, monitoring ensures that your food is safe for consumption, meaning we need to analyze for contaminants to keep them below a legal threshold to protect the consumer. Just as an example, in the US alone, there are more than 48 million cases of people who get sick each year because of foodborne illnesses. And some of you might remember there was a scandal some time ago. Okay, well, this is back in the 70s. Incident in Iraq where there was a contamination problem of mercury in food grains that made its way into the food chain, and this caused the death of more than 650 Iraqi citizens. Processed foods, they make up about 70% of the US diet. This means that there are many processing steps involved. Each processing step increases vulnerability of the food product. Therefore, it becomes necessary to increase food monitoring to ensure safety. More processed foods are trending for increased nutritional value by means of boosting the food with supplements, which means monitoring for minerals, which makes monitoring of these minerals inevitable. So on the other hand, there is the issue of compromised food safety. The manufacturer thinks something might have gone wrong during the process, and they need to dispose of the food from that batch, and even though the food might be fine. So if the manufacturer is not analyzing and monitoring for this, they wouldn't know. So food monitoring helps to ensure that they are handling their food in an ethical way, as well as maintaining good margins. Increasing demand for efficiency leads to more near the field processing. So with this, I mean that food producers, they're being pushed to adopt more quality assurance measures with their own local monitoring system to improve production to processing times. So now I will provide you with some information about who is benefiting from XRF in the food and agriculture market. My friends, before I did this research, I had no idea just how big this industry is. Food really is the biggest industry. It's kind of hard to identify exactly just how much, but with all, because it has a lot of different pieces to it. It has a lot of components that makes it hard to give it a true value. However, according to the World Bank, they estimate that agriculture, food, and the related industries contributed to over 1 trillion of the US gross domestic product in 2017, which is about 5.4% share. So, and just another example of this, the average US household spends about 13% of its income on food. Wow, I mean, food ranks third behind housing and transportation costs, making it a significant portion of our pay. And the three largest food markets by country, it's not surprising that they're also the three most populous countries, with China at 1.2 trillion, the United States at 1 trillion, and with India at about half a trillion. So significant numbers here. And so where is XRF used? The food market can be subdivided into these food groups, or these four major groups, sorry, starting with food ingredients, feed, and then feed ingredients. Okay, so the food market involves everything purchased and consumed by the end consumer, including our pets, right? And this includes items like dairy products, pet food, bakery products, meats, and so on, right? And then food ingredient markets, this involves the companies that make the components that make up these types of foods that were in that first list, such as flour, grains, edible oils, sugar, and whatnot. And then the feed market is food for our animals, for our food chain animals, right? So this includes finished feeds, blended feeds, forage, haylage, and silage, etc. And then the food ingredients market includes the components that make up feeds such as grains, and crushed byproducts, amino acids, seeds, and rendered products, right? These are all places where XRF is being used now. So I'll give you a few examples that I'd like to highlight where XRF is currently useful, right? So not to give you into like an exhaustive detailed list here, but the idea is to show you a few helpful places where XRF can be utilized. And maybe you guys can take that information and think about how it might be applied to you and what you're working with. So in some examples, like in milk powder, it's commonly used in baby formula and is a classic example of an XRF application where it's used to monitor iron and calcium fortification, as well as like sodium and magnesium content. Because the end user is obviously a baby, we're sensitive to the baby's nutrition, to the food's nutritional value that the infant is getting, as well as keeping the product safe for our babies or toddlers. So in pet food, we can measure, for example, the ash content by analyzing for sodium and magnesium, potassium, and calcium oxides, which is a regulatory requirement. Also in pet food, we can analyze for nutritional additives like manganese, iron, and zinc. And the next point would be for heavy metal contamination. As I showed you before, like in the Iraqi incident where people were killed because of the heavy metal contamination in the grains and because they were too toxic and unsafe for consumption. XRF would have been a great tool to be able to protect these citizens, to be able to analyze for this type of contamination. Metal contamination can come from other sources, like from a foreign matter that comes from the blending or grinding and mixing process parts that make its way into the food during operation through some shear or force. And counterfeit screening with XRF also, it allows for fast qualitative screening of products to ensure that they do not include economically adulterated ingredients. An important point we talk about here is incoming raw material, right? So looking at the differentiation of chlorides, for example, so we're looking to screen sodium chloride and potassium chloride. While you want to have a certain amount of sodium chloride content at a controlled amount, right? We certainly don't want to have potassium chloride in our food. And with XRF, you can have a quick cross-check to ensure that you have the right compound at the right concentration. Also, with rice and grains, they get fortified with iron and with a nutritional boost, right? So it's important to monitor that the source for iron was from ingredients and not from some trace process metal contamination. Something similar that you can find also is with juice, cheese, dairy products, and some prepared type foods. All of these will look to fortify their food with calcium, and where they want to boost the calcium content, and also monitor what is already there as in its natural form. So you're able to identify how much you need to boost. And there is an interesting application where titanium dioxide is used as a brightener in bakeries to give you your bread that makes it bright and white and give it a nice appearance. And then this is something I found pretty interesting, where you might not know this, but in the US, about 91% of all seafood gets imported, but only about 2% of it gets tested for contamination. So it's kind of an alarming fact here. Anyway, so what makes some of these drivers and decision considerations for analysis? This could be government regulated mandatory requirements, as well as some routine quality controls, both of which have economic motivations, right? It could be that you're following an official method or a norm according to some industrial guidelines. It could be that you're focused on actual qualitative or quantitative analysis to screen for results, fast, quick, pass-fail results. These tests could be run in your laboratory for quality control analysis, or they could even be analyzed and used as an at-line production tool to be able to make quick assessment of your process. A major consideration for using XRF is the need to limit some element concentrations, either from trace levels or even up to percent levels. Our question really, are we meeting the certain thresholds that we must assure is in our final product? And also, if we consider operator skills, right? So in terms of who is going to be running this analysis, meaning what skill set do they need? Can this be done quickly near the production line by an operator rather than, say, a highly skilled chemist? And finally, sample preparation. How much is involved? And does it require something unique? And does it fit within the workflow of our business? In the end, what matters most is how urgent this information is needed. This is a question you can ask yourself. How fast do I need this information to be able to make some decisions? How time efficient and fast can we respond? And what is the economic impact of that response? And real quick, an overview of agriculture feed products, right? Because most of what we just talked about that applies to food can also apply to feed and feed ingredients. Feed or fodder can be as simple as grass or silage. So that's a cellulose-based matrix with low content of minerals. And because we want to keep our livestock happy and healthy, you can mix these ingredients with high mineral concentrations and metal proteins. All right, so why is XRF the right tool to monitor food quality for you? For that, we have to know, what are we looking for, right? So first, we look at three major groups. We have nutritional elements, contaminants, and additives. With nutritional elements, they could be subdivided into macro minerals. This could be sodium, magnesium, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, potassium, and calcium. Then there are trace minerals like chromium, magnesium, copper, and zinc. They are supplemental additions, but in much smaller amounts. Like these trace minerals, it's extremely important to monitor toxic elemental contaminants such as nickel, arsenic, mercury, and lead. Additives to compounds which get added to increase foaming or to prevent caking in our foods and in our processes. This is usually elements like magnesium and calcium. This is found in some of the organic compounds. What's important here is the concentration range. When you're trying to determine element concentrations in minor and trace level elements, you could span from parts per billion all the way up to low percent levels. And we're talking about other nutritional values like protein, fat, carbohydrates that are formed in your foods. These are all performed by some other techniques, right? So actually, for example, there is a great technique for protein determination called DUMA, which we'll cover in an upcoming webinar that we're going to have next week. So if that's something of interest, please tune in to a great talk we're going to have next week with our partners at Elementar. So commonly, quality labs they analyze for elemental composition and concentration with atomic emission spectroscopy tools like AAS and ICP. These are instruments that have been in the industry for a lot longer. They have a long history, and we'll go into some details about some of these advantages and disadvantages of this type of instrumentation in some of the upcoming slides I have. But generally speaking, XRF is able to analyze both solid and liquid samples directly. This also while using minimal sample preparation, and you can even run samples like loose powders. Most of these samples are measured without the need to dilute or ash the sample, and the time from incoming sample to result is very fast when compared to some of these other techniques. There is a special advantage when it comes to food and feed applications and agriculture applications with XRF because we're dealing with lighter matrices such as biomass. This allows us to get very low detection limits in a very diverse range of sample types. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. I briefly want to give you some advantages of XRF when compared to some of those other techniques like ICP and AAS. So ICP, OES, and ICP-MS, they need argon gas because they use a plasma approach. And depending on the workload, it can run through about 1 cylinder per day of argon. And argon, of course, is very expensive. Also, the instrument must be calibrated daily before sample runs. And depending on your lab and the staff, it can account for about 30% of your daily work time. This amount of time being spent without yielding sample results can add up to significant labor costs while yielding less output. Also, you need a very experienced operator, okay? You need someone who is skilled and has a specialized lab. Oops, sorry. Oh boy, I'm so sorry, guys. Oh my goodness. Giving you guys a sneak peek. All right, so anyway, you need to have an experienced operator, right? And you need to have a specialized infrastructure in your lab to run ICP. So if you sum up all of these points, you learn that there is a high cost associated with the ownership of these types of instruments. So if you look at atomic absorption spectroscopy, or AAS, right, you also will need to recalibrate on a daily basis. Then we have the need for highly flammable gases, and you have to be sure that the infrastructure is in place, that these gases and chemicals are handled appropriately. And the disadvantage with atomic absorption is that measurements are done element by element, meaning individually, and it is very slow and laborious analysis for multiple elements, if that's of use, or if that's a need. Non-metals are not able to be analyzed, such as sulfur, which we will talk about, that can be an important element in the food industry. And with atomic absorption, measurements of elements can only be performed within a certain concentration range, right? So if you have a range of samples that are much higher in concentration, it will be necessary to dilute your samples should your concentrations run outside that range of the spectrometer. And like the ICP, you'll need to account for the hazardous materials and the management of them regarding organic chemical waste disposal. So again, you have a higher total cost of ownership because the spectrometer costs more to run. All right. So now let's look at some of the examples of the analysis run by a Bruker S2 Puma energy dispersive XRF, which is a benchtop system. In these measurements that I'm going to show here, we use the light elements version of the S2 Puma. This means that we used a special detector that is sensitive to lighter elements such as sodium and magnesium, and is also equipped with a silver X-ray tube. So the first measurement I'd like to show is from a biomass calibration. This was done with some commercially available reference materials with a light matrices in the food area with certified references such as sea lettuce, skim milk powder, and aquatic plant material. So here in this first calibration, we used these 18 reference materials to make our first calibration for sodium, covering a concentration range from 0 up to 3%. As you can see, we have quite a good standard deviation range of 0.01% and a good correlation coefficient. It really shows a nice calibration curve for the element and for this wide range of concentration all the way up to 3%, which I think is impressive for this type of calibration and for these types of samples. Another element I'd like to highlight is zinc, which is really more of a trace element, nutritionally speaking. Typically, concentrations are smaller and have a lower concentration range. And here we show a range of 13 all the way up to 313 parts per million with a standard deviation of 3.4 ppm. With 18 standards, I think you see that you get a very good correlation coefficient. For some data, here we show a repetition test on some muscle tissue. Repetition tests are a a fantastic tool that you can use to show the precision and accuracy of your XRF analysis. So here we're running an aquatic sample with 10 replicates and the concentration shown for multiple elements. For example, you see sodium, which is the first column, with an average of 3.04%. The reference value shown in this last line is at 3.06%, which is in very good agreement with the measured concentration and good relative standard deviation of about 0.51%. Also, other elements shown with good repetition, such as chloride, it's an average measurement of about 5.58% compared to the reference material of 5.6%. Potassium measuring at 0.87% compared to the reference at 0.85%, providing very good standard deviation and comparison with these reference materials. And then finally, when we look at the last column measuring zinc, again, we measure much lower concentration with these trace minerals down to the ppm range. Here we have an average measurement of zinc at 74 ppm compared to the reference material of 71 ppm, giving you a relative standard deviation of about 1.2, which I think is very impressive considering the range. Another example that we looked at are spinach leaves with this repetition test. We highlight another light element like magnesium here in this left column, where you see the average measurement of 0.92% compared to the reference material at 0.89%, which gives quite a low relative standard deviation of 0.8%. Then on the trace elements on the far right column, we measure iron and zinc with the iron at an average of 234 ppm and zinc at 81 ppm, which again, really closely matches the reference values. For spinach leaves and the measured precision for magnesium, we show on the graph with a 10 repetitive measurement scans and a 3 sigma confidence interval. So this is a very tight tolerance, and the values are very, very reproducible. You may not know this, but spinach actually is it's an important source of magnesium, and this is necessary as an enzyme activator in the human body. So it's an important element to monitor and show the data for. In comparison to the biomass calibration that we were showing, I'd also like to show you a different calibration where we participated in a feed calibration round robin test with the Association of American Feed Control Officials. This is the calibration that we used a variety of quantified reference materials that was used to perform a round robin test. These samples were made of samples like pig starter, which is a feed for early developed pigs. It also included some beef feed and even some marine concentrate samples. Here we see a calibration for potassium with those 28 standards with a concentration range of about 0.2% up to nearly 2%. So quite a wide and interesting concentration range for that element with very good standard deviation of 0.03%. And here we're looking at trace minerals like manganese with a wide concentration range from 7 ppm up to over 1,000 ppm with a very good standard deviation of about 8.1 ppm. And here on the right side, you see the overlaid spectra with the various standards that were used for this calibration. You can see a nice correlation of the signal increasing as the concentration increases. We're integrating this area in the yellow on the right side that you see here, and then on the left side of the spectra is the blue highlighted area, which we used for the background corrections. This is quite an impressive display of the 28 reference standards and then the curve that was built out of it. So based on these calibration standards, we did a measurement of unknown samples. Here you see another 10 sample repetition measurement on dry dog food, showing results for multiple elements. For example, looking at sodium, we measure an average of 0.22%, which closely matches the reference sample of 0.24%. And if you look at the other elements, this shows similar performance with very close match to the reference materials. And then the last column to the right here, we show the measurement for the element zinc. Again, this is at a trace level of 186 ppm and closely matches the reference material of 187 ppm. That's fantastic. So in this one, again, we're showing this precision data for, but this one we're doing it for sulfur. And sulfur is an essential healthy element good for the dog's skin and coat. Who knew, right? So in this graph, you see the sigma confidence interval showcasing the reproducibility results for sulfur, which, as you can see, is really good. In another test, you can see the repetition test for an unknown equine feed sample. This is feed for horses. And in this test, you can see the reproducibility and comparison to the reference data. And if you look at the elements like sodium and magnesium, you can see the measurements, again, are in very good agreement. And with the trace elements like copper, also, again, very good agreement, even at the trace level. All in all, it shows that this calibration is usable for a wide range of sample types and concentrations. So now I'd like to highlight a few examples of some customer installations, some of our success stories. So Harvest Plus is a research group financed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, based at Flinders University in Adelaide, South Australia. Their objective is to reduce malnutrition in developing countries by the development of high nutrition food crops. The use of XRF to analyze elements like iron and zinc as nutritional elements and titanium as proxy for soil contamination. These measurements are performed in normal air atmosphere, so no purge gases, no vacuum, and these were run on samples as a loose grain or loose flour in a standard XRF cup and film, right? And with this Harvest Plus, we have more than 20 installations where they're still running today and performing great. And at Ho Chi Minh City University, this is in Vietnam, at this research facility and education center for food-related topics, they use XRF for several programs like food safety and quality control, for food processing technology, and biological techniques used to prevent food spoilage. And then another major development that I'd like to show you and share with you is this forage quant, where our customers at Cumberland Valley Analytical Services collaborated with us to develop a solution for the analysis of nutrient minerals in feed and forage. This is a transferable solution based on a master calibration created with more than 300 standards. So this is something that we can take and utilize all around for measuring your forage samples right out of the box. So now we'll highlight some of the features of the S2 Puma and how they benefit you folks in food and agriculture type of business. So the S2 Puma has been around for a long time. It's been a huge success. And this year, Bruker launched the second version of the S2 Puma, the Series 2, which provides customers even higher performance than before. This is realized in the significant increase in detection and the speed of analysis. With the Puma, you have a choice to select, and this can either be the standard configuration using the high sense detector with the palladium tube, giving you a range of elements from sodium to americium. Or you can boost your performance with the light elements configuration that uses the high sense LE detector, light elements detector, and a silver target, both of which give you power all at a 50 watt range. But you can see that you can get an extended range of elements that can be utilized with that lighter element configuration, if that's something useful for you. Now, the S2 Puma has an integrated touchscreen for easy operation. So it has an intuitive little touchscreen on there that users can interface as a standalone operation. You can also connect an external PC if that's something that you prefer to do. And you can also have a configuration where you don't use a touchscreen. But in majority of our installations, our customers do enjoy that simplified touchscreen operation that allows the operator to walk up to it and perform accurate analysis with 3 simple steps. They select the sample position and the application they're going to use with a touch of a button. They enter in the sample ID number and they press measure. After that, it spits out the results and you're on to the next sample. It is glove compatible, and it's been developed to be utilized in even some of the toughest process control environments. I've seen some installations that are quite dirty and dusty. The S2 Puma comes in 3 different versions. There is a single position unit with manual sample input, where these are common in operations where sample throughput is relatively low. There is a 14 position carousel unit, which comes in handy when you have a mix of higher sample throughput. So you have a number of samples you can throw on there, up to about 14 samples. But you can also take the carousel out and be able to measure spot checks on larger samples and even mask it down to a spot size of about 1 millimeter. But the more common in this arena, in this market space, is the S2 Puma with the XY auto changer. It comes in handy with a 20 position easy load XY sample tray. This tray can be a mixed group of samples, and it can all be utilized in one sequence. So what I mean here is that you can have on that sample tray a set of samples in liquid form, in powder form, and solid form, and without worrying about it having a problem analyzing either of those types of samples in multiple varieties of environments. So new samples can be loaded at any time with this XY system onto the sample tray. So if you have an emergency sample or a quick check sample you need to run, you can throw it in any time and tell it to run that as the next measurement. And then it utilizes a function called sample care, which guarantees the highest instrument uptime. So what is sample care? Sample care is part of the S2 Puma XY system, and it comes equipped with a cap at the end of the detector that prevents accidental spills or droplets from contaminating the detector head. It has a Dura beryllium tube shield and a filter wheel to protect the X-ray tube head. And there is a liquid cup recognition sensor that ensures that helium mode is used for liquids rather than trying to pull a vacuum to evacuate the sample chamber, which if you use a vacuum on a liquid cup, it could tear the sample film and cause a spill. Not just the Puma has been enhanced, but also the software. So the software that the S2 Puma uses is called Spectra Elements, and it's now even faster and more stable, which allows for quick contemporary programming for rapid processing. It has powerful features like evaluation plugin, which can now reevaluate your samples much faster. So if you make any quick changes, you can reevaluate your calibration curve much faster. You have improved post-processing tools and some new basic and advanced mode features. The software is now smarter. It's using the standardless solution called SmartQuant, which is a fundamental parameter type of analysis that allows you to run your sample and get a semi-quantitative value to not just know what elements are present, but also give you an idea of how much of that element is present in your sample without the need for calibration standards. And sample interface is actually even now more user-friendly and with much more intuitive and flexibility. So all in all, I like the features they've added here. The S2 Puma is really the ideal instrument for food and agriculture analysis. It provides you with a high-performing energy dispersive system, highest performing system on the market today. It has enhanced analytical performance due to the HiSense technology. It's intuitive, easy to use touch control user interface, making it very simple to run even on the show floor or on the production floor. It has robust setup for tough environments and high sample throughput. It's very low running costs, and with sample care, it really does guarantee the highest instrument uptime because now the problems that you had with sample breakage and leakages and anything as spoiling onto your detector or two have now been all but eliminated. If you're interested in learning some more, there are some pretty good application or publications that you can check out. There's one that is a study of pet foods in an issue of Food Analytical Methods, and another one on a study of benchtop XRF for measuring elemental nutrient content in foods in all stages of production. This is found in the Food Quality and Safety magazine. So check those out. Those are actually some really great resources for you. And there was also a great poster that was published, again, with our partnership with Cumberland Analytical Laboratories, where we show the benefits of using a benchtop energy XRF system like the Puma for a wide range of elements and material types. So in summary, XRF has some good advantages for improving food and agriculture analysis. Requirements for food and feed analysis in many types of elements, from sodium, magnesium, silica, phosphorus, sulfur, on and on and on, with a wide range of concentrations, ranging from low ppm up to several weight percent, all the way up to 100% if necessary, and with minimal sample preparation. So you literally can just run this as a loose powder material, place it right into a liquid cup with a proline thin film of about 3 microns in thickness. And you can utilize several calibrations for different matrices. So you can use large sets of reference materials and secondary standards for a wide variety of different types of materials. So it's quite beneficial to set up your calibration with a wide range of materials and analyze for a wide range of different food types. So we'll jump into some Q&A portion here in just a bit, but first, Lauren has a quick announcement.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Some really good information there. Before we transition to the Q&A, I wanted to share part 2 of our Elemental Analysis of Food webinar series. Next week, our partner Elementar Americas is going to be presenting a webinar on determining nitrogen and protein in food products, with particular attention to examining the Dumas method versus the Kjeldahl method. They will review the chemistry of the two techniques, explore how Dumas can save time and money, and review some comparison data showing that there is no bias in the Dumas method. All right, so we have a few questions that came in, so let's kick off that Q&A. All right, Brian, a lot of food ingredients have heavy metal limits for lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic at 0.1 ppm. Would XRF be able to reach that detection limit for heavy metals?
Yeah, actually, heavy metals is something that's quite easy and doable by XRF. So it certainly can measure that limits of detection. And of course, there's some caveats here. You need to make sure that you've done care in terms of preparing your sample and making sure that it's dense enough to analyze and what type of material it actually is. But yes, that is definitely one that is doable by energy dispersive XRF.
Fantastic. Yeah, sounds like a good application for that. Our next question is, can XRF detect nitrogen in plant matter?
Oof. Yeah, unfortunately, that is one that XRF is not a good analyzer for. This actually be better for an instrument like we're going to talk about next week, like using a combustion method to be able to analyze nitrogen content. It really is able to do low level of nitrogen content all the way up to high percent level of nitrogens, and really is kind of the standard in the industry.
Fantastic. The next question is there any validation that shows the XRF method can bring the same accuracy and precision that AAS or ICP method can achieve?
Um, so yeah, so accuracy and precision is, again, it comes down to the limits of detection that you want to analyze for. It comes down to the, those are more sensitive techniques, right? So those are more applicable to a trace level type of analysis. But those have their own inherent errors as well, right? So can you show accuracy within the comparison to it? Yeah, there's the ways that you can do this where you have a range of samples that you calibrate against, and then you show the precision doing standard precision tests and repeatability tests. And this can be done in a couple of ways. One way I like to do it is I'll show one sample run 10 different times. And then I'll show 10 different prep samples and run those 10 different times, showing you not only the accuracy of the analysis, but also the accuracy and precision of and reproducibility of the instrument itself. And by then you can do some comparative studies. And so some of those charts that I was showing you, where they were showing some good accuracy, that's what we were doing. Those reference methods materials were analyzed by ICP and or like an ICP OES type of system, and we were able to again show good correlation within a really nice standard deviation.
Awesome. Some good questions coming in. Next one is how high can XRF detect sulfur?
How high? Usually that's not a question I get. Usually sulfur, I'm usually asked like how low. So this is great. You can go as high as you need to. I mean, all the way up to 100%.
Let's ask how low can you go?
Well, right. Well, and again, that's that question where is you have your accuracy of the type of sample that you're going to analyze, right? So if it's a solid, if it's a liquid, and all that. And so typically, well, give you an example in some common sulfur analysis is in fuels, right? And we can do sulfur lower than 1 ppm, right? So you can get quite low on sulfur, and sulfur as high as up to 100%.
Awesome. This is an interesting question. Does your facility need to be licensed to use an X-ray source, like a radioactivity license?
You do, and that's state by state. When someone purchases an XRF system, they need to check with their safety commission, the local chapter in their state, and register the serial number of the X-ray tube. And they may even get some spot checks where someone comes out and checks to make sure they're following safety guided regulations, that they require to have dosimetry to ensure that they're not being exposed to X-ray radiation and so on. So the good sources are just check for, if you Google, radioactive safety commission and then enter your state, and you'll get right to where you need to go and what you need to do.
Awesome. I figured if anyone knows the answer to that, it's you, Brian. All right, let's keep going. How is benchtop XRF different than micro XRF, and is one better than the other?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Okay, so benchtop XRF analyzers, they're more of a bulk analysis, and they can quickly measure elemental, nutrient, and contamination content in food products. And again, at any stage of your process, from production, incoming raw materials, all the way through to your end products. Micro XRF is more of a technique with a spatial resolution significantly smaller than a benchtop XRF, and this enables for like micron size sample analysis. Micro XRF actually is helpful for analyzing small particle where debris that is found in like production samples, and you want to look at things like. Maybe particle inclusions, like in a plastic film that could be in your packaging. So think of micro XRF as like a benchtop microscope that uses XRF instead of visible light, and with the ability to map out an area of a surface and provide elemental composition.
Awesome. Next question, can XRF be used to analyze trace metals in aqueous samples?
Oops, sorry. Well, okay, so XRF generally is used for solid samples, and it's not very suitable for the assessment of dissolved components in aqueous samples. Sometimes pre-concentration can be used, like using like a polycarbonate membrane, but generally other trace analysis techniques like atomic absorption spectroscopy or ICP will generally perform better than an XRF can do. However, XRF is great for analyzing some of the suspended fractions in an aqueous sample. So you still can measure that, but there are limits.
Awesome. And then, is a benchtop XRF accurate and sensitive enough to be used to monitor nutrient genotypes for biofortification breeding? Whoa, that was a mouthful.
Biofortification rate. Well, okay, yeah. So I've seen some studies where even energy dispersive XRF systems are being used for breeding programs. But this question again is that sensitivity gotcha, right? So if the limits of detection is a trace level, like parts per billion, then you're better off with another technique, right? But if you're working from parts per million up to low weight percent even, yeah, sure, this is manageable. But now for the accuracy results, again, these are those considerations that we have to take in, right? So you have to remember that XRF is calibrated with a reference material, which is analyzed by your primary method, like AAS or ICP, and the results on the XRF will not they'll not be able to provide results more accurate than your primary analysis. So also another factor again is that it's sample prep, and even though XRF has minimal sample prep, you do need to ensure that you have consistency in your procedure, like making sure if you're using like powders, for example, you have a consistent grind or consistent mesh size to keep things fairly consistent in your procedure.
Fantastic. Wow, I actually think we got to everyone's question.
Right
All
on.
right. Yeah, I think that's all we have time for. Brian, thank you so much for presenting today and sharing your expertise with us. Just everyone, as a registered guest, you'll receive an email within the next few days with a link to this recorded webinar. We have a ton of resources on our website, lqa.com. Make sure to check out our brochures, application notes, and other on-demand webinars, and this webinar you see on your screen. Join us next week. All right, that is it for us. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.